Hello and welcome to The Exchange.
Today in the show, we will be chatting about individualism versus community and which is more important to cultivate and develop.
We all love our iDevices, so does that mean we live in an I culture rather than a we culture? How do we develop a healthy sense of both?
Individually, when we come together, we make a community. In this community, we can develop friendships, share wisdom, encourage one another and share the journey of life. In an age where it's so easy to connect, it's interesting to see so many people disconnect from face-to-face contact. Does this represent community, or are we heading to an individualistic culture? How do we develop a healthy community in an I culture?
Today we're joined by Madden from McCrindle Research. Claire is a social researcher and next-gen expert and is fluent in social media, youth culture and engagement styles of these global generations. Thanks for joining us, Claire.
Great to be here.
Good to have you with us. We're also joined by Change.org's Australian Director, Karen Skinner. Change.org is the world's largest petition platform, empowering people everywhere to create the change they want to see. Great to have you with us, Karen.
Thanks, great to be here.
So what do you think, guys? Is it I or is it we?
It's a great question. We are in the era of selfies, aren't we? With selfie developing as a real phenomena over the last couple of years with the smartphones, which then developed to be able to take better selfies with the flip camera on the front. And so there's definitely that side of things, the I culture and the selfie culture. But we also have done some research looking at Australians' priorities. And what's the number one priority for Australians? Every time we measure it, it's relational. Relational over vocational or over financial and different areas. So relationships absolutely matter to Australians. So that community side of things is definitely a priority.
I think it's really important. And when you go to some of the Asian countries, they've now got these long sticks that they put their iPhones on.
Selfie stick.
The selfie
right.
stick, or the narcissistic, I heard someone call it, which I thought was very clever. But is that indicative of being individualistic?
Look, I think the way that we express ourselves as an individual and the way we work as a community is changing, but I don't think that we have one or the other. So I think, with technology, we see at Change.org that people share their individual story and that spreads very quickly online, just like selfies do, just like you sharing what you had for dinner. But it doesn't mean that people aren't also using technology to build community and to connect. And actually, in some ways, we're building community faster because of technology and are more connected than we were before. So I think it's about how individualism and community or collectivism is transitioning as we see technology grow rather than whether we have one or the other.
And certainly your organisation works with petitions, which is each individual's voice coming together as a community to have a global voice. And how are you finding that's working?
Absolutely. I mean, what we're seeing sort of cut through in petitions is often people starting one as an individual, talking about their own individual story or what's affecting them, but then we're seeing tens of thousands of people come behind them, want to back them up. And we're often seeing through petitions, people can connect with similar people that are in, the same kind of situation. So, for example, we've got a mum who lives in a regional community whose son has terminal cancer and he's using medicinal cannabis. So she might be in a local community, but she might be the only one that's experiencing that. But by starting a petition, she's connected with families and individuals throughout the country who are also facing the same thing. So she's sort of got her local community, but then she's now got her online community that is joined together because they have a specific experience or a specific want in common. So I think we're seeing both geographical, but now we're seeing community build fast online based on your experience.
Common experience.
Exactly.
And are you finding that's effective then, in really getting people's voice across and change as a result?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think people sharing their individual story means you can understand an issue much easier. The medicinal cannabis one, hearing the story of Dan and what he's going through and how he's suffering through chemotherapy really makes you see, okay, it's not just a drug or it's not just a statistic, it's actually someone's experience. And then we're seeing, obviously, through social media, you can share petitions very quickly. And so tens of thousands of people can join and, be part of achieving change. And at Change.org, we've seen in the last 2 years 1 million people in Australia be part of a petition that's won. So clearly the numbers show that real change is kind of happening because people are harnessing the power of technology to build effectively communities
and
online.
The power of we.
Yeah.
Well, where do you think people, you were saying that your research is showing that people want to contribute. Where are the main areas that they want to contribute?
Well, they are thinking local as well as global, like Karen was just mentioning. So they'll still want to contribute in their local sports club or at their local school, but also they're aware of global issues. So they can communicate and get involved and contribute to issues that might be happening on the other side of the world. So like Karen was saying, community is no longer determined by local proximity. But it's now we're so globally connected that people can get involved with issues that interest them from all parts of the world.
But are we actually seeing, like you're talking about 1 million people engaging in petitions, how does that then translate into change? Like, could you give us an example of something that's changed because of one of those petitions?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, petitions are the first thing you do. You kind of sign, which is an indication I care about this. And then through the petition, you can do a whole lot of other activities that lead to kind of change. From calling your MP to attending a meeting to attending an event. And we see sort of change coming, all the time. For example, peacekeepers are now going to have their names added to the War Memorial, where they didn't previously, because Avril, a mum of son Jamie, who died in the Solomon Islands fighting for Australia but was technically a peacekeeper, she fought to have their name added. So from, big sort of national things to that, to really local things, like the mum who managed to get the bus to stop right outside her kids' school rather than across the road so that they didn't have to cross a busy, dangerous road. So sometimes what people want to see change is really kind of local and small, and you wouldn't guess it. And then sometimes it's really those big national things that you can influence. And from a decision maker's point of view, from a politician's point of view, online you can see those numbers, you can see that groundswell, you can see that there's a lot of support there, whereas previously it would have been harder to gauge quite what the community's thinking as well. So it's a good, way to express yourself as a whole lot of individuals making up a collective, really.
Very good. And do you find that people are coming to you, searching you out for these? Are you finding that government is searching you out?
Yeah, so we're a platform, so people can kind of just go online and start a petition. But yeah, we're increasingly seeing organisations, you scan Twitter, you scan the news media, you scan petition platforms like Change.org to make sure you're aware of what issues are bubbling up, what issues are taking off, absolutely. And increasingly engaging with them as well. So people can respond to petitions on the site if they're a target of one. So we're seeing increasingly them, politicians or companies sort of adding their comments onto the petition and finding out what people think at a deeper level as well. So yeah, it's exciting.
It really is exciting. I love the fact that it's translating through to, the stories that you're talking about. We're actually seeing change take place.
Every week we see at least a couple of petitions in Australia win. So, and they're individuals, generally they're individuals who've never done something like this before. They're not kind of activists who have done this their whole life. They're people who one day think, I want to see something change, and jump online and see what they can do with it, really.
That's very exciting. I've got an idea and I'll discuss it with you. That's great. Claire, I'm just interested from your perspective and the research that McCrindle have done into the various generations, and is there a difference between I and we, individualistic and community, in different generations? Are one more important than another in various generations?
I think community is being redefined differently as we move through the generations, and I think as some examples, they're showing the collective power of community now that we're so globally connected. So you take an example of something like your Encyclopedia Britannica, which was written by the experts, and we all went there to do our school assignments, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
And it was printed from 1768, but its final print edition was in 2010. And the shift has been then to Wikipedia, which is not written by the experts, but by the collective community. And so these younger generations, your Gen Zs, are growing up in a world where they're used to being empowered and having a voice and being able to contribute. Their idea of an encyclopedia is one they can change and contribute to. And so that empowered, technologically savvy kind of generation definitely approach community in a different way. Also, the social media communities that they are a part of. You've got, if Facebook was a country, it would would be the world's largest with 1.4 billion active users. And Twitter would be number 4 with over 646 million, and Instagram will be in the top 10 with 152 million active users. So in your top 10, you've got 3 social media sites showing that they are getting cut through in how these new generations approach community, at least as an initial part of community.
Wow, they're amazing stats. We need to take a break. We'll be back with Street Talk and more right after this.
Do you think our culture promotes community or individualism?
I think community, our culture does.
And do you think that's a good thing?
Yes.
I would say individualism.
Bit of both, but mainly community. But there is a little bit of individuality there.
Nowadays in society, you know, our young kids growing up, it's all about them. They want things now. They don't contribute. They don't share. And it's all about them and not for the better good of, you know, the community and society.
I think Australia is exactly not selfish. So I'm from Germany. I'm a backpacker, and I love Australia for being not selfish.
There's definitely a drive for individualism, and
I think your culture promotes both. I do see a lot of community aspects in your culture. I see a lot of tend to embrace a lot of different cultures, which seems to be nice.
I think it's a mix of both because in some respect we all live together, like here we mix, but in the other point of view, the career or the try to get more money or to try to have success sometimes is promoting the other way around.
Individualism, I think. Since arriving here, I find that they promote everyone to do their own thing, everyone's their own person. Not that there isn't a sense of community, but definitely that people aren't afraid of expressing themselves.
I definitely think it's going towards more individualism because we are just all running after more community on Facebook or whatever type of virtual community.
individualism. All you need to do is look around you, really, and you can see that everyone's different and everyone's happy to be different. We don't conform in any way.
And which of the two, individualism or community, do you think is more important?
Community, definitely, yeah.
And why is that?
Because a good living together makes a good economy, and a good economy makes good living for everyone here.
Community, yeah, definitely.
Community.
Why is that?
Because you have a good community spirit. Everybody works together, looks after each other, and you're on the right track.
I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think, they can work together quite well.
I mean, to be strong individuals, I think you have to come from a good community, so I think we should probably start out with building a good community and then focus on building individualism after that.
Probably community, but I mean, I think that's in a city as big as this, you won't find that as much, maybe in the suburbs, but in the city, individualism is probably more important.
Individualism, 100%.
Community is a good thing. I think it's good if we can all work together and become one big community. It'd be wonderful.
Welcome back. We're discussing individualism versus community with McCrindle researchers Claire Madden and Change.org's Karen Skinner. And Sandra, our Street Talk reporter, welcome.
Great to be here.
It was like a kind of International Travellers Day there, wasn't it?
I thought every person I asked on the street
had an accent.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. It's a global community.
That's right. That's exactly right.
A wonderful reflection of Melbourne too, I think, as a city. If we can just give Melbourne a plug.
Absolutely.
You know, all the nations have come to us.
Yes.
So what really stood out to you there?
Look, overall, mixed bag, but I think what came out loud and clear is that community should be promoted high above individualism, that we should be promoting the values of looking out for each other and building a strong economy and sense of community.
And is that a lovely politically correct ideology? Because when it comes down to it and you're on the road, and I would have thought community would have been letting somebody in, invariably you get cut off. So we all, like, is this a
really
catchphrase? Is this individualism versus community a bit of a catchphrase? Or is it really, when it comes down to it, like, do we go to the place that's cheapest to buy our stuff? Or do we go to the local community that services us?
There's a lot of layers and complexity to it, isn't there? But I think deep in the Australian spirit is a love of community and that Aussie mateship, which has forged a lot of our national sort of identity, that helping one another. And I think when you see a crisis like the Brisbane floods or, you know, some sort of natural disaster or crisis, you really see the Australian community banding together. They rally together and they help one another out. And it's not about what effort I have to put in and me. It's actually about, oh, I'm getting in that and I'm helping clean that person's house, whoever they are, or rebuilding that school or whatever it is. So I think that there's definitely a deep love and acknowledgement that we belong to a community. And whilst people feel like they can have self-expression and that individual expression, I think that there's an acknowledgement that they come alive and can most be fulfilled in the context of being able to belong and contribute to a community.
It's a shame though, isn't it? There's often it's out of tragedy that we actually rally. How do we actually get that community spirit happening all the time, do you think?
Well, I think you do see it. I mean, I think you see people, you know, collectivising to achieve common aims all the time. Tragedy is the kind of the one that hits the media, but you see it, you know, people helping each other out all the time. But I think it's the, you know, there's extreme of either, really. You can have the kind of extreme of collective that means that people can't express themselves as an individual. So we actually want to have a society where people can still feel safe to be who they are, you know, and express who they are and have their own opinions, you know, have their own political opinions, have debate, have whistleblowers coming forward, you know, where we actually do value people being able to express themselves, but then getting things done when there's a common good, allowing ourselves to kind of still get things done where we need a collective.
Throwing in a little red herring here.
Here we go.
Because I just can't leave this alone. When it touches our pocket, like how often do Australians buy local above buying overseas, buying online? The common, you know, comment, you take an empty suitcase, you go to the US because prices are cheaper. So where does the ideal of the economy, we heard economy, but when it comes to our shopping trends, are we looking after the individual or are we looking after the community?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, I think you do see trends towards, you know, local farmers markets and people wanting to buy local, but it's also about people's reality. So if you finish work late, you don't have many choices about where you shop. You go to the major supermarket chains, you buy what's in front of you, you know, and we're increasingly working longer hours and sort of being forced to engage in the hours that we've got. So I think it's the ideal and what you'd like to do, but then there's a practical reality, you know, comes into play.
But then you see things like fair trade and people wanting to have a social conscience and, you know, making sure that what they're drinking, for example, is coming from an ethically sourced product. So we're seeing that.
And that requires effort though. And sometimes we have to, it's one thing to say something, it's easy to say things, but then when it requires an effort, like you say, is this sustainable, is this ethical?
It's also when it's done as a collective. So you individually buy, but if you know that a product has suddenly been, you know, in the media for being terrible, then it's actually when you collectively boycott it that it really has impact. So we've seen that with free range versus caged eggs, for example. There's been a kind of mobilisation of consumers. So when you go to the supermarket, you might feel, I'm actually not just an individual. I know that there's a whole lot of other people that are sort of mobilising around this as well.
Again, though, that's an economic choice because, I mean, I will always, when I go to a supermarket, buy free-range eggs, knowing full well that I'm going to be paying almost double. But it's a choice I make because of a collective awareness, I guess. And one thing I want to pick up, Claire, that someone kind of made this mass generalisation about young people and they're all individualistic. Is that a fair generalisation from your research?
I think we have to be careful of generalisations like that, and I think the young generations can be sort of stereotyped to be seen as individualistic and just obsessed with their own social media and selfies and things like that. But really, at the same time, they are very globally aware. So they are the most globally aware of big issues that are happening around the world, and like you say, from getting involved in petitions to being able to actively help in other ways, I think they do contribute. It just looks different to maybe perhaps how community is traditionally looked.
So an older generation actually might be misjudging the younger generation
it looks
in
differently.
that regard.
That's right. There's been some research this week that's come out that shows that young people are earning less, are more in debt, are finding it hard to buy houses, are having to pay more for their education. And so there's also a reality that we've placed on younger generations that they have to just battle to get through because they've got unstable jobs, they don't know if they're going to get a regular income, so they're just trying to fight for their hours. So I also think it's about what are we kind of creating for young people, and are we allowing them the space to be able to kind of really be collective, or are we forcing them just to kind of battle with to get the basic things like a roof over your head?
We need to take a break. Thank you, Sandra.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Fabulous. We'll be back with more in just a moment on The Exchange. Welcome back. We're chatting with Claire Madden and Karen Skinner about individualism versus community. And is there a balance between the two? Who would like to start?
Well, I think it's really important that individuals can have self-expression, but that doesn't mean not being part of a community.
It's not either or, is it?
That's right, it's not either or, and I think a healthy community is where individuals can still express who they are. And you look at Australia as a community, we're incredibly culturally diverse. 1 in 4 Australians weren't born here. You've got over 46% of households have at least one parent born overseas, so you've got incredible cultural diversity.
We're one of those families.
Yeah, that's great.
Actually, we're both born overseas.
There you go. So, but it shows that we've got to be able to express our, individual strengths and bring that to but that then together builds community. Bring that together.
Yeah, I would agree that I think it's, it's not one or the other, it's both. But we do have to recognise that, there are some things that you can't achieve as an individual that you have to achieve as a group or as a collective. And that's that's where you kind of really rely on being part of a community. But then sometimes you need to be able to have the space to express yourself or do things as an individual. So I think a healthy community or a healthy society has both of those.
So what are some of the new areas of community that people are calling their communities, would you say?
I think workplaces is a really big one. We're working longer hours, we're commuting further, so often, your workplace and your workmates are your community, and we're increasingly seeing that. And I think that puts a real onus on employers to be, looking at how they kind of manage workplaces based on that, in particular when you've also got an increase in casualisation. So your community is your workplace, but you can be gone from that job really quickly, and what does that mean to, to our mental health and to our sense of well-being, I think is a real challenge. And places like, gyms, where is now your community. It's not just going for exercise. People. We were talking before, about even your cafe. Making sure your barista knows your order and can have a chat and things like that. I think, and then obviously online we've talked about as well. It's just a massive space for people to be connecting and joining. So I think some of the more traditional institutions that we might have looked at. Political parties, churches, unions, the membership of most of those is in decline, but then we've got these new communities kind of springing up online and workplaces. So it's a really interesting shift to watch.
I wonder though, you mentioned gyms, for example, and we train a couple of times a week, and I would say the vast majority of people training in a gym these days have got earpieces in, they're listening to music, there is no community happening. It's a bunch of individuals working out. And I'm just wondering, because there's something within us. I mean, I love time on my own, but also there's that kind of hankering for community, being part of something and achieving something together, as you said before. I'm wondering if there's going to be some sort of backlash at some point in time, even being in a cafe with a group of people and you're all on your individual iDevice. Is there ever going to be a backlash, do you think?
I think there's a definite human driver for belonging and for community, for being known and for knowing others. And I don't think that's going away. In fact, with our world of social media, where we've got more connections than ever before, so we're more broadly connected and more continuously connected, yet not so deeply connected through those forums. And so there's research that shows that calls to helplines from young people about loneliness are actually increasing in this day where they're more connected than ever before, but needing that depth of connection, that substance of relationship. And so, places that can offer that, and the places like the workplace are being looked at for needing to offer more than the pay packet, but needing to offer that workplace culture where people belong. You've got churches offering that community as a place where people can belong and grow in that kind of community. And so even schools, they're places now that are working hard for community, not just education, but the whole
Working
person,
together.
working together.
So we may see an increase. I mean, you mentioned a decrease in some of those groups.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll come a time where we see an increase because of our natural desire to connect. Otherwise, what I find is sometimes we can just be together alone. You know, and ultimately that's not satisfying. Anyway, ladies, thank you so much for your time today.
Great.
It's great to
Lovely having you.
Yeah,
That's
thanks
great.
so much.
Thanks for joining us today, and please go to our website for a fact sheet as well as more information about our show. Hope you can join us next time.
Bye for now.